Hello, welcome back to Green TV. I'm so glad you've joined us for this very, very, very informative segment. I know it's going to be about the IPCC report, which was chilling, which was dire, and which got totally buried in the news about the war in Ukraine and Russia. That is a legitimate reason to bump the IPCC report just for a day or two, but unfortunately the way news goes, and that's my background, is broadcast news, they won't get back to this. And this was such a headline grabbing report, yet another one, this assessment. And I am so pleased and honored to have two of the climate scientists who worked on this IPCC report. Camille is an adjunct professor at the Jackson School of Geosciences, or affiliated with that, in Austin, Texas, where I am coming to you from. And she is currently in France, where she has an assignment from President Macron, which I find fascinating. We're going to hear about that, called Make Our Planet Great Again. Sounds like something else. I want to hear about the genesis of that. And then Franco, who is currently in the Dominican Republic. She warned me that the power might go out, and that might have something to do with oil and energy. We're going to get into that. She is on faculty with Virginia Tech in the Department of Forestry, Resources, and Conservation. So I think I've got those preliminaries out of the way. Now, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we are going to get into the IPCC report, but I just want to hear a little bit, Camille, about Make Our World Great Again, Make Our Planet Great Again. When did you get that?
Yes.
Did it have anything to do with somebody who was talking about Make America Great Again?
Yes, indeed. I was in Britain, actually, working at University of Plymouth, and Brexit happened. And so I was not very happy about that. And I was looking around in the USA again, trying to think of, well, where do I want to land myself, thinking about coming back to Austin. And then Trump pulled out of the Paris Accords. And within a few days of that, President Macron put out a video in English where he very elegantly said, American climate scientist, you have a new home in France. We welcome you. And I sort of said, okay. So I applied and I got it. And within a year, I was happily ensconced in France.
Are you in Paris or out in the country?
No. I'm in the foothills of the Pyrenees. We live on a 80-acre farm. It's absolutely fabulous. Wonderful researchers around. I love it.
But you still home in Austin. Do you come back and forth as needed?
Yes, I do still have an affiliation at University of Texas at Austin. We still have a home there. My whole family is in Texas. So I definitely will retire there at some point. But for now, I'm really enjoying being in France.
I can imagine. And are there any signs of climate change there in the Pyrenees region?
Well, it's actually got a pretty near perfect climate. But what we do notice, and what the locals tell us who've been here multiple generations, is that there is much less snow in the mountains. It melts much earlier. They used to regularly get snow on the ground in the foothills, and now it's, once every few years. So yeah, I mean, people are noticing the signs of climate change here as well. Although right now it's still a very productive area. It still has fabulous biodiversity. So we're not seeing the most negative impacts here yet.
Yet, emphasis on yet. Franco, you're in the Dominican Republic, and that is your home country. And you said that there's some chance that the power could go out. This is before we jump into the report. I just want to get a real world check of, conditions out there.
Yes, I'm from Dominican Republic. I am also a scientific advisor for the Ministry of Environment here. So I come regularly. And also I am, as a scientific advisor, I am part of the negotiations of climate change. So I'm part of the delegation of the country to go to the negotiations and follow some of the topics. Red Plus I did, and now agriculture. Mm-hmm. And if you're asking for impacts of climate change in the Dominican Republic, first, let's say it's a small island development state. So we do have a lot of impacts, especially issues with sea level rising. And that's one of the worst ones. And that's why the country at this point has a very important goal to focus on adaptation and adaptation measures because of all the impacts that we're suffering from climate change.
And we are going to talk about what the report said about adaptation and mitigation. But first, UN Secretary Antonio Guterres, I feel like he's running out of words to say that are alarming. It was code red for humanity in the report that came out last August. This time it was delay is death. Do you agree with those very strong statements?
I'm personally a very optimistic person. I'm a happy person. I enjoy life. So I tend to shy away from doom and gloom statements. But in putting together this report, it's very clear that we have evidence that we do still have a window of opportunity to limit global warming, but the window really is quite small at this point. A lot of options we had are gone. And even quitting all emissions tomorrow, if that were to happen, would not prevent warming continuing. And it's very clear that the biosphere is absolutely essential for sucking up the carbon dioxide we've already put out. But the biosphere is weakening so it has already absorbed something like, I think, 30–40% of the carbon we've put out since industrialization began. But both the ocean and the land biospheres are weakening. They are not able to take up as much as they used to. The ocean is simply getting saturated, so that's just a physical thing. And on land, we've started ecological processes in various systems, in tropical forest, in US and Canadian forest, and up in the high Arctic, that are climate change's self is weakening those systems' ability to remove and store carbon from the atmosphere. So increased wildfires, increased pest outbreaks, thawing of the Arctic permafrost, drying of peatlands. All of these are things that climate change has already shifted these systems towards being weaker carbon sinks, or even in some cases, they now emit more carbon than they suck up. So they've gone from being historical sinks to being sources. Now, at this point, that effect is relatively small compared to the human emissions, et cetera. But what the message that we were trying to give policymakers is, we can control human actions, we can control human emissions, but we cannot control the biosphere. So climate change is starting to move the biosphere into being a carbon source, and that will continue even after human emissions have stopped. So that's a very sobering message, and it is a very serious message. And I don't think of it as doom and gloom. I think of it as, here are the numbers. This is what we're seeing. That's the message it is very challenging. And at this point, we don't have as many options as we did 10 years ago, and certainly not as many as we did 20 years ago, when IPCC was first bringing this up as an issue.
And you were involved from the very beginning. We're going to get to you, Carol, in a minute, but I've seen your name in conjunction with IPCC reports during the 20 years I've been covering climate. You tell me it's been 20 years for you. Can you believe how much time has been wasted, and how this such a physical, science reality issue has been so politicized? And were you in Paris, and then when Trump came in, I mean, I had to pull off the road literally when Trump said we were pulling out of Paris, and cry.
What's astonishing to me is I have been in this since the third assessment report, so since 1997. And we have enormously more data now. We have the number of studies on impacts of climate change has just exponentially grown. And yet, if I think about it, the message we had back in our third assessment report, published 2001, was saying, we're already observing impacts. We're already seeing that this relatively small amount of climate change, it was like 0.06 degrees centigrade back then, is already shifting species poleward, already changing timing. We're not seeing big negative impacts yet, but we expect them to come fairly soon. Okay, here we are now 20 years later, and we're seeing all systems being affected. We're seeing impacts in all regions, in all oceans, and they're widespread, and they're almost all at this point negative. We actually did perceive where the natural systems were going 20 years ago, and we simply have we simply now have enough evidence to say, guys, we were right. And I hate to be right in that sense.
And the only thing you're wrong about, is the speed at which this would arrive, right? Did even you expect it to be so avoidable, undeniable at this point.
No, I think that was the surprise for all of us working on the report is we're now at 1.09 degrees centigrade. So that's, a little more than double what we had 20 years ago. And I expected to see many more impacts, but what I didn't expect personally was that they'd be so widespread and so overwhelmingly adverse. That I think was, we were trying to look for positive impacts of climate change, and it became very, very difficult to find any study that actually detailed climate change being a good thing. Even in the Arctic, where yes, some parts of the far north have improved agriculture, but many areas don't. That productivity is going down because climate change is not just taking the climate and nicely, softly, gently shifting it towards a more optimum condition. It's changing extreme events. It's increasing the frequency and severity of extreme events. Extreme events are not good for agriculture. Extreme events are not good for any system.
Carol, your overall thoughts about this particular report, the latest, being even more alarming than the last?
Yes, I would agree with Camille. I don't like doom and gloom, but at the same time, because people shy from it. If you say we are doing so bad, some people might just shut down and say, like, why do we keep trying? Why there's nothing we can do, right? But I think this report, even though it's a very strong message, on one side, it gives solutions that we can do it. It gives the gaps that we have, like we need more resources for adaptation. We need more financial flows. It tells you that as humans, there's a lot we can do. And we can change our behaviors and our attitudes in order to help and try to decrease. It also brings you ways that like nature-based solutions. Okay, we have all these methods that we could use like nature-based solutions, but we need to take care of nature so it works. So in a sense, for me, yes, it's a little bit alarming, but we also need that. Because for me, it's like future generations, they need to hear it. They need to see, okay, we need to start acting out. And we have to be all of us. It cannot be just the scientists, cannot be just academics. It has to be everyone. It has to be a holistic approach. That on one hand. On the other hand, talking about history, first IPCC report was 1988. And talking about sustainable development, which is also huge in this report. We're talking about first time that we coined the definition of sustainable development was 1987 with the Brundtland report. So as Camille was saying, we've been talking about it for quite a while, and not much attention has been paid, I must say, sadly, to what we've been saying. And I think it's because of the Earth Summit was in part because of precisely the Brundtland report and the IPCC in trying to get here. UNFCCC came out of the Earth Summit. So we have progressed, but we're still kind of providing more evidence to what we have said since 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And I think that's this report, even though it brings that back, yes, we have done some progress, but we're still so much to go and so much to do. But also the solutions for me has been key. Since I teach in the university, I was telling my students about it. And it's like, there is hope, we can do it. We need a lot of political will. Okay, we have to put that up front. But there's a lot that communities can do. There's a lot like NGOs, the civic society can do. However, again, the window of opportunity is narrowing down and we're going faster and faster towards it. So we need to start making decisions yesterday. And we need to start implementing those decisions and focusing again, especially on the regions that are more vulnerable, because there's some more vulnerable than others and that are suffering the impacts more than others, focusing on adaptation measures.
And you mentioned CCC, is that the UN Climate Change Conference?
United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. So adaptation mitigation, I understand what adaptation is mitigation trying to reduce the amount and the rate of emissions being released, or is it something else? Because I know so many activists just say we can't just focus on how to deal with it, after it's here, which it is. We need to cut it off at the source, which is, massive, aggressive across the board reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, which of course we have not achieved. So give us maybe a definition of mitigation?
Reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
That's
In a
what it is,
nutshell.
that reduction. Okay. Mitigating the amount and the rate and all that. Okay. Glad to hear that.
A reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And just to continue what you're saying, we need both. We need mitigation and we need adaptation. For the longest time, we focus on mitigation, thinking that if we focus on mitigation, we wouldn't need to do so much in adaptation.
Right.
However, it has been proven that we need to focus on both. It's a synergic relationship. Again, historically, it was much more mitigation. Even the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions at the beginning, only included mitigation. It was because of the push and because of the pressure of developing countries that included adaptation. And many of developing countries included adaptations in their NDCs because of the importance of adaptation. The same with the Green Climate Fund. That was another thing that happened that has 50% for adaptation, 50% for mitigation, trying to increase that. And in the COP26, there was this push also to increase the adaptation goal, and it's in the Glasgow Climate Pact, because we need to continue to increase that adaptation goal, because the way I see it, adaptation was in the back burner for way too long.
And both of you, I assume, were at COP26. And Camille, what was your experience there? And did you leave encouraged or discouraged? Or maybe you weren't there? I don't know.
I was not there, and it partly is due to the pandemic, just making travel very, very difficult. But what I wanted to add is that part of mitigation also is schemes to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And there are technologies, carbon removal technologies, and actually the Make Our Planet Great Again program, some of the people who are hired are very into the high-tech stuff. And so I've been hearing about it, but it's literally laboratory scale. I mean, it is literally, you know,
Not real
still
world.
it's not real world yet. And I suspect it'll be 20 or 30 years before it's real world. So right now, the best way for removing carbon from the atmosphere is through plants. It is through our natural systems. And that's one emphasis of our report is natural systems, healthy ecosystems actually are very good at removing and storing carbon. But right now, very few of them are protected. And a lot of them are degraded and not doing that function very well anymore. So one of the easiest, cheapest, no-brainer ways of removing carbon is actually to protect and restore our natural ecosystems. And interestingly, so Working Group 3 is actually going to be coming out with its report in just a month, and they're all about mitigation. You know, so you'll get much, much more about this in a month. But interestingly, we've been working with them in Working Group 2, and a lot of the biologists are in Working Group 2. And we've had a very good, productive exchange about these nature-based mitigation programs and when they can go very, very wrong. So planting trees can be the right thing to do, but it is absolutely not the best thing to do everywhere. If you have a natural grassland system or a natural treeless peatland bog, you do not want to go planting trees there. And I think some of our Working Group 3 colleagues who are not biologists were quite surprised at that. And so we put together, overwhelmingly what's called afforestation. So not reforestation is putting a forest back where it was, that's fine, and there are good ways and bad ways of doing that, but afforestation, planting trees in areas that are naturally treeless, these projects have occurred, and what was astonishing is they have been overwhelmingly failures. Huge negative impacts. You lose the native biodiversity first. Second, you're creating a system that is not naturally sustainable. It's not stable, especially it's not resilient to climate change. And so many of these projects have ended up where the trees all die after a few years. You get massive emissions of greenhouse gases. So you're actually doing the opposite of what you intended. And so they're just bad ideas. So as well as saying, yes, nature can be a solution, we emphasize that you've got to do it in the right way for the area that you're working in. And Indigenous knowledge becomes very important. Local knowledge, indigenous knowledge becomes very important. What is the historic state of this system that we're dealing with? How much has it been degraded? What are the changes being seen? And what can we do to get it back to health so it can be functioning the way we would like it to function to help society meet its global warming goals?
So when is a tree not a good thing? Because that's the big rage, is everybody's selling, plant a tree. Carol, your thoughts quickly on COP26, whether or not you were there, but curious if you were. And then also this, planting the tree being the best solution when, of course, like you just said, Camille, very eloquently, that's not always the case. And is there any monitor, like global monitor of like, we can't plant trees here, we can do it there? Or is it just like the wild, wild west?
So first on COP26, I was there. I've been going to the COP since 2012 as part of the scientific advisor for the Ministry of Environment and for my country. It was interesting, to say the least. The pandemic wasn't an issue, but I think the UK managed pretty well with the self-testing and all that. We were able to go to the negotiations, and we got the Glasgow Climate Pact. One of the most important things that we finished the Paris rulebook, which we needed to do, and we were pretty behind on that. We needed to get it done. Honestly, I was a little bit disappointed with the Glasgow Climate Pact. I was expecting more. Especially issues, for example, as to decrease or completely get rid of bad subsidies, which, how do you define bad subsidies? Subsidies are bad. So
also, when you're subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, which is continuing to be part of the problem, making it worse.
So I was expecting much more. You were expecting it, I was expecting it, but again, the reality that countries cannot just jump into it. So it's both things, but still you're always at each COP, you hope it's going to be different. We're going to do more. We're going to get more committed. Countries are going to make a change. And you have to keep that hope up.
It'll be different. Yeah.
You have to keep it up, because if you don't keep that hope up, then you get really disappointed. And then you say, okay, this is not working out. So there were very important things. Again, the increasing in the adaptation goal. That for me was huge. There were IPCC event. My colleague as a review editor, Andreas Fischlin, was there. So something that was huge from the Climate Pact, nature-based solutions come out of it. So they mentioned nature-based solutions. And for me, that was really, really important. And it goes back to science, the beginning right there, science, IPCC. And I think it's the first time in any document from UNFCCC that is an agreement or a pact that comes back to IPCC science and nature-based solutions, like right there. So I was very excited about that part.
It's right there, but is it right in front of the American people? And I left, the broadcast news industry because they were not covering environmental news, and it continues to be de minimis, really, almost token. Yes, they're doing stories, but you see what happens when news breaks, and a breaking planet or breaking climate doesn't seem to make it. So how important is that to educate the public, not just here in America, but around the world? And I don't know if it's better in other countries, but I live in Texas now, moved here from, more progressive Bay Area, and I have neighbors who fought our solar panels. And there's just a lot of educating to do. I'll put it nicely. Eco-literacy is a problem, I'd say.
I would say, first of all, if for the first time also in the United States, it's the first time that a COP gets so much press.
Yeah,
it was everywhere in the United States. It's the first, not even Paris. No comparison. Mm-hmm. It was the first time that a COP gets so much press. And it was, Al Gore was there as usually in Glasgow, Biden was there, Obama was there. And it get a momentum, right? People were really excited that the United States were back in. And that was important. It was an important message. And also the United States also gave important messages about funding available for different things. So that was in a sense key to get other countries to buy in. Senator Kerry was there the whole time, very active, talking to many people, going around.
Been there a long time, working on climate change. Many people
yes.
know that.
Yes, and he was there the whole. He was in Paris. He was in Marrakesh. He's just been going for a while, but he was there. So, United States was very active. That does not mean not only United States, worldwide. Of course, we need education, training, capacity building. There is an article in the Paris Agreement called ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment, and it has to do with that education. And yes, we need to educate. And something that I think, besides all the press that came out from the COP, something that I didn't see was that there was not that much press on the climate pact itself. What came out of it? What did we get? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think that was important. And again, because it mentions things that the IPCC right now, this report brings out and provides the evidence to what we were trying to achieve at the COP. And I think Camille can attest to that too.
Yeah, and that's more than a one-day story, what happened at the IPC. And this year it didn't even really get one day because of Ukraine, of course. And there's so much in there that people need to know, and so much work goes into it, and time and effort. Is that really kind of a waste of, critical information that we desperately need right now?
No, absolutely not. And I want to point out that our assessment actually included the need for increased climate literacy. That there is evidence that the more the public is educated, and of course politicians, but the more the general public knows and understands climate change, the better, the more effective the solutions are. Because you need everyone. You need not just the politicians and not just the scientists, but you need everyone understanding what's at stake. And so I'm a native Texan. A lot of my family's worked in the oil business, so I'm very, very familiar with that side of the climate change issue. And what I am, I think, the most disappointed about is that it has become political. And my family were very strong Republicans. Generally agreed with the Republican Party line. But this was back in the 1970s when a lot of Republicans were also environmentalists, including my family. There wasn't this political divide between Republicans and Democrats as to whether or not you were pro-environment or not. I mean, President Nixon signed the Endangered Species Act into place. So.
And it didn't happen by accident or just kind of by chance. It was a concerted effort that continues to fuel the public.
And I don't actually understand what's happened in the USA with suddenly, being interested in having a healthy environment is suddenly a political issue. It shouldn't be. It has to do with societal health. It has to do with our own individual health as human beings. And certainly what we've shown in our report is it's essential for getting global warming under control, that we have a healthy natural environment. And so I'm hoping that will change. With increased climate literacy, I think that will change, and that this will start becoming less of a political issue in the USA. In other countries, it isn't. That's throughout Europe, it is not a left-right issue. Well, climate change, environmental protection is not a left-right issue. Everyone is in favor.
Well, we have a very active disinformation campaign, not only coming from the fossil fuel industry, but of course the right-wing media. They are still downplaying, delaying, diminishing climate change, and even questioning the science. Somehow they got away with that for the last 20 years that I've been aware of it. People got a little bit concerned when they were spreading disinformation about COVID, which was causing some deaths. Well, guess what? Same thing with climate change. And those dots have not been connected, and how they can get away with that. I call it theft and murder, because it is theft of our children's future, and it is a life and death issue. It's disgusting, but don't get me started on that, because I want to hear more from you. And I know we just have a couple more minutes. We are at 420 parts per million greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Some of us follow that closely and get alarmed. Most people are totally unaware that the safe level is 350 parts per million. How concerned are you about this?
You've just asked the $1 million question. That's very difficult, I think, for either of us, at least. I'm very concerned about it. I am not defeatist about it. I do think we can turn things around. but it will require energizing all the different levels, the public, the local governments, the state governments, the national governments, to a degree that they got energized to deal with the pandemic.
Exactly.
I mean, we actually have a cross-chapter box on COVID, and it's not about COVID being related to climate change, because it actually isn't. But it's about, what does this mean for the ability of society to respond to an emergent, urgent crisis? And it shows that we can. We can deal with it as a nation. We can deal with it as a global community. Maybe not perfectly, but think of the speed of the vaccination development. It's just astonishing compared to what you would have expected before the pandemic began. And so we can mobilize at all these different levels. And the message is, we need to do this for climate change.
Exactly.
And
look how quickly behavior can change across the country when the emergency and the urgency is repeated night and day around the clock, which it should be. So many of us were hoping that we would learn something from the pandemic. Carol, do you feel like we have taken away messages that should be applied right now? And now with war and nuclear plants being, it's hard to, climate change is the one common enemy every country faces. And we should be doing everything in our power to be fighting that right now. To see a war break out which has an oil component is so disheartening.
Well, also to answer the question about if we are worried, we are very worried, but that goes back also to education, right? How do we involve the communities? How do we involve civil society? Teaching the next generations, so we don't get to the same place, so they understand the facts, so they understand what is climate change and why are we suffering these impacts. So we need to build on that and have hope that all this is going to get to where we need to go at the time that we need to do so. So education, political, and also when you're talking about, for example, policy and the policy process, you're talking about issue expansion. We need to expand the issue. Everybody has to take part of it. Everybody has to put pressure on our governments, because it's a lot about political will. But if you put the pressure just when you want something to get done, the vaccines, when there's an environmental problem, and you get that issue expansion and you get the conservation groups to act together and put that pressure, you can make it happen. And if we do that throughout the different countries, I'm hopeful that we can make our governments do what it needs to be done.
Of course,
we need to do that as a whole. It's a holistic approach. It cannot be just in certain areas. We all need to be part of it.
And including educating adults, because we can't wait for our kids to grow up and take care of it. The climate window, you know better than I, is closing quickly. And so that's where education, media, and Green TV comes in. I thank both of you for being here. I could talk to you all day. I hope you'll come back, because I didn't get to half my questions, but I don't want to, I respect your time. And I really want to hear about Make Our Planet Great Again, because I thought that was just a meme that, President Macron came up. I had no idea.
Oh, no. There are, I think the total between both the German and the French programs, it's over 50 scientists were brought in. And I think something like 35 are in France. It's been fantastic. And everything from the very high-tech people to, the ecologists like me. So it's very diverse group. And
is there a chapter here in the United States? We need one.
No, it's I would love a US, like,
we're a small minor state.
It would be fabulous if the United States started bringing scientists from all over the world to make our planet great again. That would be great.
Let's make that our goal, because there's no time to waste, and only everything is on the line. We didn't even get into oceans and what's happening there. So please, can I have you back soon, both of you? It's been an honor to speak with two prominent climate scientists, and especially female climate scientists. I think if they, the men, would let we, the women, run the country, or, communities, companies for a decade, I think we'd see some different outcomes, including perhaps not rushing to a crazy war. Of course, that's one particular madman, but how scary is this moment, right? I mean, just has his finger on the nuclear button. So I hope that, there's so many things to hope for in this really dangerous moment, but if it knocks climate change off the agenda, for any length of time, Mother Nature isn't waiting for us to get our news together,
That's
for the
a
time
good
of your
way to
life.
put it. And I would say I'm totally in accord with you
Okay, Camille.
and love to come back.
Thank you, Camille
Thank you.
Parmesan and Carol Franco. Your knowledge and your optimism is so much appreciated. I'm sure our viewers, as part of the Meet the Solutionary series, will love listening to you, and we'll be happy to hear that we're having you back. And please,
Thank
if
you
you
so much.
are enjoying
Thank you.
our programming, please go to YouTube and subscribe. The more subscribers we have, the sooner we can go live streaming, get more programming on, and tell your friends about us. And if you are so inclined, donate. We are a group of volunteers. This is a labor of love, but we're all experienced. We just believe that the time has come to get this news out there, because let no one be ignorant, right? No matter all the problems we face, ignorance should not be one of them, especially in this very connected 2022 world we live in. Thanks again.